Hi, welcome to the Council of Competitive Intelligence Fellows webinar series. And for this month, we are talking about CI management models, strategic versus tactical, with Tim Kindler and Alysse Nockels. And so a bit of an introduction about the Council of Competitive Intelligence Fellows. So we are a 501c3 educational nonprofit organization. The Fellows started as an honorary organization, but we've expanded to this educational mission, supporting ambassadorship and being champions, mentors, and educators for people who are interested in competitive intelligence and related functions within organizations, so we can practice ethically and effectively. And our members represent countries all over the globe, from Argentina to the UK and the United States, as you see here. And I'm Cynthia Chain Correa, the president of the council, and welcome, and I'm delighted for you to join us. I'm also particularly delighted that we have our fellows, Tim Kindler and Alysse Nockels. And so Tim is the Global Competitive Intelligence Lead for Ernst & Young. And prior to joining Ernst & Young, Tim was the director of the award-winning corporate CI team at Kodak. And so this is a very notable distinction, and we're looking forward to hearing some of the practices that he had applied there. And he's been in practice for over 20 years and very active in organizations like the Strategic and Competitive Intelligence Professionals, serving both at the national and local levels as well. And so, as I mentioned, Tim is not only just a CI fellow, but he's also the Skip Meritorious Award winner as well. And then I'm also delighted to introduce Alysse Nockels. And some of you may have seen her here on these discussions as well, contributing to our webinars. And we're delighted that she's headlining this time. And so, and Alysse has built the CI program for Titanium and McAfee from the ground up. And so her expertise within the tech industry. The CI function that she built at McAfee was very well known for its discipline and a number of other management aspects. And so we're looking forward to hearing about that. And she's recently joined Titanium to build its CI program. So in addition to that, she's also held a number of roles in Lockheed Martin, as well as leadership role with the Skip Board of Directors and elsewhere. So welcome, Alysse. And I want to turn this discussion over to Tim and Alysse now. And they've shared with us a graphic that's going to get them started.
Thank you, Cynthia. Alysse and I are going to start just by giving a little bit of a brief background for ourselves and how we've gotten to where we are today. I'm going to start, and then Alysse will follow. But as you said, Cynthia, I've been doing this for 20 plus years. Actually, the number of years is 27, which is somewhat shocking to me. 20 of those years in CI were at Kodak, and then the last 7 or so have been at EY. So it's actually been a very fun ride. My time at Kodak actually started in an IT role, systems development, and I did that for 10 years, and then I had an opportunity to find out about this wonderful world of CI. Thought I'd do it for a few years, but it's been a great ride and no looking back, really. So at Kodak, I did lead the team for the last 15 years that I was there. I left Kodak in 2012 when we were mired in bankruptcy, and we can talk a little bit more about the Kodak story. There's been a lot of questions about Kodak and its CI team, and if it was supposedly doing such a great job, how did this happen to the company? How did they go down as they did? And we can talk more about that. But in 2012, I had the opportunity to join EY and their CI team. It was actually joining some folks who I had known through Skip and through the conference board. So it was a little bit like going home in a way. It was also interesting in that I went from Kodak yellow to EY yellow. I went from the Kodak ticker symbol of EK to the EY. So didn't have to change a lot in terms of some of the things in my life, and was able to keep my residence in that. And at EY, and that's going to be a lot about what I'm going to talk about today on the call, but we've had a very interesting transition of CI within the team. It's always been strategically focused, but all the more so most recently. And I'd like to talk more about that transition in a few minutes. But that's kind of my background briefly. Alysse, I'll turn it over to you to say a few words.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Tim. I'm actually really excited to be here. It's very cool to be on one of these calls. I've been a longtime lurker, and it's very cool to be here, so thank you. Just a little bit background about me. I have a slightly different story than Tim's. Like everyone who is in competitive intelligence, almost all of us have fallen into it accidentally. I was a systems engineer at Lockheed, where for circumstances that I can certainly talk to in another call, I decided that I wanted to apply for a role in competitive intelligence price to win. And for some reason, that manager decided to give me a shot. I still to this day don't know why, but I am very grateful because that was 15 years ago and I'm still in this profession. So it was really cool. Now, I had an opportunity to merge my skill set in the tech world or my college education with computers and networking with competitive intelligence when I took a role at Secure Computing. Now, at that time, Secure Computing was it was like sub 1,000 people, cybersecurity company. And the only reason why the CI function even existed and why they were able to expand and build this thing out from the ground up at Secure Computing was because part of the justification for hiring my role, a new rec, was by adding a sales advocacy function to it, which was not at all to do with CI. I mean, what I ended up doing was doing a lot of like RFP responses, battle cards, doing pricing analysis, stuff to help sales. Basically, we were like a sales support desk or help desk. And that was the only way that they could justify having even a bit of competitive intelligence in the company. So when I came in, from day one, I have been very focused on tactical CI, really helping the sales side, the marketing side of the world, the actual day-to-day operations. And it wasn't until I attended a competitive intelligence seminar, and I'll leave the name undisclosed, where I felt like I was being pressured and bullied into being strategic only. It felt like in the entire session that I was like, the whole class was being told that if you're not strategic and you don't report to the C-suite, you're useless. And it was news to me because I felt super valued. Like I could tie back my team's, role, like in our value to, like a real solid ROI with like the revenue we help bring in the win-loss and those data points. So when I heard that I was not valuable from this particular CI session, I was a little like taken back. So I asked the instructors after the session, offline and said, so here's my situation. I am valued on the tactical side, but what's this deal with the strategic? And basically what boiled down in that conversation was I was told that if I'm not reported to the C-suite and they're not listening to me and I'm not driving decisions at the top end of the organization, I should quit and go somewhere else because they don't value me and I'm not providing value back to the organization. Now, if I were a weaker person, I probably would have listened. But thankfully, persistence is one of my core values, and I did not choose to accept that. Instead, I pursued in rather somewhat of an anger fashion to persist on this whole tactical piece. And actually, long story short, McAfee acquired Secure Computing, and the only reason why my team even was like available, like didn't get cut, I guess, in all the layoffs that happened after that acquisition was because we had that really strong tie to sales. We were bringing in revenue. We had a tie to an actual revenue generating function as opposed to a cost center. So that I honestly believe is the only reason that my team was able to not only survive through 13 different bosses and 9 department changes in 10 years, but also thrive. Team was never cut. Budget actually increased for our function over that period of time, which actually is kind of rare for any organization that goes through a major merger and acquisition. So that's my story, and that's really why I want to support and persist on the importance of tactical competitive intelligence and actually provide the counter to what a lot of people think is the only valuable function, being strategic within a CI function or within an organization. So that's my intro.
Well, Alysse, why don't we talk a little bit back and forth here? As you and I started thinking about this session and what it could potentially be, and we talked about things that were happening at EY in terms of the CI organization, maybe even becoming more strategic than it had been, and you staying on the tactical end of the spectrum. And as we talked about your experience and what you just shared with us, right, in terms of tactical is not valuable, strategic is where it's at. And you think about different continuums and the value chain and trying to move up the value chain per se. But even in my history at Kodak, which was a strategically oriented entity, we also did have pieces of the CI community that were tactical in nature, right? So I've always personally thought about the continuum from tactical to strategic being one of where the value of the work resides, not necessarily in being high value, low value. Both sides had high value. It's just who was gaining that value and how immediately applicable that value might come was really part of the issue.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's why I spent a lot of my career in tactical. I should probably preface this that I did do some strategic work. When I had a team that could support the value of the organization was really tactical. It was revenue. Just to give some insight into my industry, cybersecurity is highly competitive. 4,000 or 5,000 competitors and mergers and acquisitions every day. VC money coming in like crazy. It's an insane competitive landscape. So the value for us was at the tactical level. But we had some moments where I had like a team of 8 and we were able to cover that. I started working in doing strategic work. And what I found was that even though we were moving at lightning pace, the strategic element in cybersecurity was not where I wanted to be. And I didn't find that I was providing as much value there. We did war games, strategy sessions, we worked with the C-suite, all the things that you're supposed to do. But what I found is I got really impatient with the fact that it took longer than I wanted to see value back. I saw immediate value in the tactical side. On the strategic stuff, I'm far too impatient to deal with that. And so I felt more valued, I guess, dealing with more of the sales marketing functions. So Tim, speaking of value, since you're really, strong on the strategic side and you're really embedded in the EY's strategy, how do you, gain value and show value within EY?
Yeah, so it's interesting, Alysse, and let me maybe step back a little bit. When I joined EY 7 years or so ago, the CI team was part of what's called EY Knowledge. So it's kind of a knowledge support function for the firm as a whole. And the firm itself is a $35 billion global entity with 260,000 employees. So it's a big entity that we're trying to serve. But most of the work that we were doing really was focused, I'll say, at levels supporting the service lines that we have, our business units, supporting the geographies. There was not a lot of work that was being done for the C-suite, for the CEO, for the global board. And so I kind of think about where we were then. It was strategic kinds of questions we were dealing with, but not the big strategic meaty issues that the firm had to manage. After about 3 years, there was an entity inside the firm called Strategy and Analysis, which was doing more of that strategic kinds of work for the firm. They were doing a little bit of CI there. So what we had to do is try and rationalize what the CI entity and knowledge was relative to the small CI piece in the strategy team. And ultimately, we ended up coming together. We became part of Strategy and Analysis. And at that point, we were elevated, I'll say, closer to the C-suite. And what we were doing was working on more of those really meaty, substantive questions that the global board was dealing with. We had a great champion in the head of global markets who we were reporting to. And she was really a proponent of our work and was highlighting work that we did for the global board. Fast forward to July 1st of this year, and over the last 3 or 4 years within global markets and the strategy and analysis team, we're doing more and more work for the board and for the chairman. But moving forward to July 1st of this year, EY now has a brand new global strategy entity in the firm. So I'll say that the strategy and analysis team that we were part of previously was kind of small s. It was more analysis than it was strategy. But the new entity, Global Strategy, really is a strategic engine for the firm. And CI now is part of that entity. So when I moved into EY, there were probably 3 people, 3 levels of management between the CEO and where the CI team was. Now there's 1. Mm-hmm. So in terms of our proximity to leadership, to the board, the kinds of things we're working on has done a dramatic shift in terms of where CI is, the kinds of project we're working on. And all of that gets back to your original question, is where's the value, right? Mm-hmm. So the value is in terms of delivering those insights, providing that market-based focus, that competitor-based focus and insight and perspective that helps leadership decide where they need to take the firm, decide where their strategic direction has value and where it may be challenged in the marketplace. So the degree of integration with leadership, the degree of integration into the strategic direction of the firm, I think is where CI over the last 4 or 5 years has really been able to demonstrate its value, or we would have been relegated to a smaller team, continuing to be multiple layers away from the leadership team itself.
And actually, I'd like to share an observation or question from one of our fellows, Mark Chussell, who's known for his strategy work. He asks, is there any value in distinguishing strategic from tactical? Why not just talk about decisions, to Alysse's point, and value, to Tim's?
It's a great question, and I honestly wish that would have been how it was communicated to me when I was 27 years old, because I thought I was a decision support mechanism. Yes, I wasn't necessarily reporting to the C-suite, but I was helping internal folks, regardless of title and compensation, make strategic and make more informed decisions. That's what I thought I was doing, and I was doing. It wasn't until that training where I made the distinction that somehow I'm failing as a CI practitioner, and I got kind of pissed off about it. And hence the reason why I'm like, why are we distinguishing the two? So I would actually agree. We're decision support regardless of where that is, and we do it where value is generated in the organization, wherever that might be.
Yeah, I tend to agree as well, and that's consistent with my thinking previously, right? It's a continuum of where the value resides, not necessarily a measure of how much value is there. It's decision support. My work at Kodak, my work at EY, all of this has been decision support. It's a function of what that decision is, what the time horizon of that decision might be, how immediately applicable it might be, what the scope of it might be. But there are tactical and strategic decisions that I think CI can leverage insights and perspectives to really add value and create competitive advantage for your firm.
Mm-hmm. And this actually brings us to another comment from a fellow, Luis Madureira. And he says that in my experience, strategic and tactical are 2 sides of the same coin, as it is strategy and execution. What do you think?
It is, I guess I'm struggling with how to answer that. I guess I feel like it is you are, on the tactical side, you are executing on a strategy and a vision. So that is very true. I think Tim, on your end, you're driving that strategy so that the tactical folks down the road, 2 to 3 years from now, could execute on that. Is that kind of is that how you feel about that?
Yeah. I mean, when we think about strategy at EY, we kind of have the big, high level, firm-wide, longer-term direction that we're trying to get to. And then underneath that, there are business unit strategies, there are geographic entities that are implementing strategies, there's sector-based strategy that happens, and those tend to be more tactical in nature in terms of the way they implement them. You know, the senior level CEO was thinking about, okay, where do we want to be in 3 to 5 years? We just, at July 1st, a new global chairman took over, and he has a 4-year term. So he's thinking about that 4-year block of where he wants the firm to be at the end of that 4 years. But along the way, the business units themselves, the country firms themselves are all implementing plans that are 3 months, 6 month, 12-month, 2-year kinds of horizons. And they're going to need to have the support, decision support for those shorter term entities. Not that they aren't important decisions, but they're just more near term in terms of the way it gets implemented.
Yeah, and this brings to other comments too that I'd like to share with you. Vishnu Chandrapandi says, I think it is the impact that matters a lot. The strategic impact is company-wide, having high visibility and reach where tactical is more microscopic effort. So one kind of feeds the data back to the other. And this also speaks to the graphic that you have here, Tim and Alysse. And that also sparked a question from Richard Caldwell, asking, what is long and wide that we see here on the screen in determining strategic versus tactical? Is that driven by the market, 5 years, 20 billion?
Oh, I think it depends on industry, honestly. I can't speak for every industry. I can speak for high tech, and I could say to be strategic and to forecast what a competitor move is going to be, you're lucky you get out 6 months to a year. It's that dynamic. I know that there's a lot more stable industries out there where you could go 5 years, and bless your hearts and awesome, but I find it very difficult in an industry that I've been in for the last so many years, the last decade or so. It's almost impossible to try to predict anything farther beyond 6 months to a year.
Yeah, from our industry, it's interesting as you think about some pieces of our business. The traditional audit and tax side of the business is, I don't want to say moving at glacial speeds, but it's not something that's going to be changing dramatically in the short term. If you think about the consulting side of the business and new technologies that are coming in and our ability to support clients as they think about AI and RPA and blockchain and cybersecurity, those are things that are moving very rapidly. And we're needing to really challenge ourselves to stay current, both in terms of our own internal capabilities, but also understanding where competitors are and where they're positioning and where they're trying to get to, and how EY might be positioned relative to the others in the marketplace.
We have a question here from Justin Solis. He says, do you feel that the CI initiatives, tactical and or strategic, need a high-level champion to push this ahead? And he also said that you mentioned that a high-level strategy is implemented throughout a number of low-level strategies in terms of time, geographies, etc. Are there various strategies, these various strategies ever reviewed to see how well they align?
Yeah, I'll start with that one, Alysse, if that's okay. Because having a champion to me is critical to success inside a firm from a CI perspective. We can talk about how CI is a mainstream profession, but it's not accounting, it's not marketing, it's not finance, it's not any of those things, right? So to a certain degree, at least my experience has been the success of the CI team is often highly correlated with having a champion. So I talked about when we moved in EY from knowledge to global markets, we had a champion there, and she really took us and had us integrated into the global board. We moved to global strategy because the new global vice chair of global strategy knew about CI, knew me, knew the team, and wanted us to be part of his organization. So he's a champion for what we did. at Kodak, it was the same thing. When we had a champion, we were highly successful. The last couple years were a struggle because all of our air cover went away. And it was a challenge without a real champion inside the firm.
I can't agree more. The only thing I would add to that is that, in my opinion, one champion isn't enough. I came with the conclusion that I wanted everyone as my champion. I wanted hundreds of them. If I could get them, the more the merrier. Because with layoffs, with people moving, bouncing around companies like ping pong balls, you can't rely on that one person to be there the whole time. So I spent most of my life and most of my CI life trying to build relationships with anyone I possibly could, even folks that might not be at C-suite level, who I thought might be someone that could bring us with them as they grew. Like I'd actually go out and identify, in my opinion, people who I thought were the future leaders and get and work with them very early on, so that as they grow in their roles and take on new responsibilities, they're like, hey, that girl, that chick, that team had my back. I'm taking them with me. That was kind of my strategy. And that was really helpful in all the change that went through at McAfee. And it's been helpful. And I'm building that kind of mentality at Tanium now.
Yeah, I think that is important to not think about having that air cover be aligned with just one person. You want to have as many people as possible finding value in what you do. You want to make sure that you're building your brand and your team's brand inside the firm and have that widely known. So I think branding is an important component of maintaining that air cover and having that champion. But yeah, you're right. Having more than one is important. I had two at Kodak for a number of years. They both left within a month. And we struggled at that point to regain.
And we have a question here from our fellow Cliff Cow. He asks, in large multinationals, what are your thoughts about separating a strategic from a tactical CI group? Could it just be one flexible group that takes on either type of decision support, or are there certain CI professionals who are uniquely suited to one or the other?
Yeah, this is all personality profiling. I had so much fun with my team. We did Myers-Briggs, Strength Finders, we did it all, values-based stuff, because I wanted to understand how the team ticked and what their strengths were. A team of 8 seems a lot in some organizations, but what we were dealing with was still pretty small comparatively, like looking across the entire landscape. And what I found is that there are people on the team who were super strategically mindseted. They were the folks that really got frustrated doing tactical things. They weren't being effective, and they weren't happy. And I'm really a strong believer that if you have people who are passionate about what they're doing, they're going to kick ass and do amazing work, even if they don't have the skill set available like right away. They'll figure it out. So maximizing people's natural strengths with their role was huge. So there were a few folks in the team who were more strategic, and you want to make sure that those folks have that piece tying back into a strategic element of the company. But there are people who are so much better at a tactical level dealing with firefights and sales requests and just the dynamic nature of the insanity of being in sales and cybersecurity. Those people could not function at a strategic level. They'd be miserable. So it's all about really figuring out, like, I think there could be value definitely having a combined team so that there isn't this whole dichotomy of I'm strategic, I'm better than you, or I'm tactical, I'm driving revenue, you're a cost center. That whole bickering, because anyone who's been in an organization who's had multiple CI teams know there is internal bickering. It always happens. So if you had a combined team, that's awesome. As long as the personalities and the natural strengths of those people in that team were tasked with the things that are best suited for them.
Yeah, from my perspective, Cliff, thinking about your question, I think people are somewhat predisposed to being better at one than the other. I don't think that's universally true. From an EY perspective, though, I think it's just a function of the organization structure and where it makes most sense to have those people sit. So my team is sitting now in global strategy. It's a firm-wide global position, whereas a lot of the work that gets done is at the country level. It's at a business unit level, and having people who are closer to the market, closer to the end customer, closer to our clients. It just makes more sense for them to physically, or at least logically, be more aligned and closer to those entities. So that the nature of that means that the strategic and the tactical work, although they can cooperate, they can collaborate, it doesn't make a lot of sense for them to be that close together.
I have something funny to share with you in case you haven't seen it. So Mark Chussell writes again, if you want to start a fight at a CI bar, start talking about strategic versus tactical. And when people stop pummeling, try strategy versus execution. Executing a strategy does not mean killing it. So I just want to make sure that people don't miss that, a bit of levity.
That's awesome.
Our fellow Brett Ashton asks, it would be interesting for each speaker to briefly describe one example of a CI project that was successful and why it worked well.
Tim, you have one off the top of your head? I'm still thinking.
Yeah.
It's hard to choose, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll focus on one, and it was one that we did last year. It was a request that came directly from the global chairman, and he was interested in two topics, and one was related to intellectual property. And one was related to alliances. And intellectual property is not something that you necessarily would think about professional services firms as doing. But some in our realm are thinking about IP and how they can protect some of their work moving forward, especially as we think about new technologies around RPA and blockchain and AI and that sort of thing. So the question really was, where is EY relative to the other firms in this area, and who's really ahead? So it was not a subject that we've ever tackled previously, and it's one that we had to engage some outside entities to help us. But we had a pretty good understanding by the end of the project as to where we were relative to the others. And it did allow us to get to the point where we had a decision by the CEO to form an internal IP office and really focus on investing in that area to make sure that we were protecting our own intellectual property appropriately and making sure that we could also use that in the marketplace as a selling point for our capabilities, et cetera. So it was interesting in that it was somewhat non-traditional in terms of things that we had typically been asked to do in the past, and led to an immediate decision to fund and invest in internal effort.
Yeah, so I think I'm struggling because there's like a lot of fun things that we did. But I think the one that will always be known for at McAfee was the CI portal, the collaboration we built within the overall organization. So we've all done multiple CI portals. I mean, I think I built 7 of them at McAfee, because every time we build one, the platform would change. So we built one based off of Jive with built-in collaboration. And I think we actually won an award from Intel Security on this because it was so impactful to the organization. We built this, so basically we built a framework based on, the different markets that we compete in, and then had pages for all of our prime competitors. And each page had a very structured setting where it had kill points, strengths and weaknesses, and then, the dialogue, what they say and how we respond. Very structured setup for each page. But what was great about it with what we use for Jive is that it had built-in collaboration mechanisms. So people could ask questions for each competitor or even at the market level. And people within the company could subscribe to that page. So it wasn't necessarily the team of 8 and the McAfee CI team that was responding. It could be anyone who subscribed and saw the question. And it became more of a self-help. People could post questions, and a product manager or a product marketing person or even another salesperson could respond if they've seen that particular activity or they had an answer to that question. And what that did is it made the CI team so much more broader, could take on so much more questions and support the tactical functions a lot better because we had the support of everyone else in the organization. And it's something I learned very early on in my career is that I never want to be a one-man or one-team show. Competitive intelligence should be embedded in every part of an organization. And so the more you can collaborate with people and give them mechanisms to contribute, is that was one of the most valuable things that we did on a tactical level at McAfee. And I think that, I don't know if the portal is still there. I've been gone for a couple of years now, but I hope it's still functioning.
Terrific. And Alysse, I just want to do a little bit of a check here. Your audio seems to be cutting out a little bit.
Oh.
So perhaps if you can just come a little bit closer, at least from my end. But yeah, thank you for expanding on that. And we also have a comment in the Q&A. And so Guy Neary says, it's also a matter of point of view. When positioned in a lower niche, a location in the organization, the CI exposed to different kinds of information and less balanced, and work directly with the company management leadership. And so we don't see what the management see, and that's a problem. And so it's a matter of internal perspective here.
So the question is that if you were residing in more of a niche or sub-compartmentalized part of the organization, that you don't necessarily know what management sees or hears. So
the lower you are in the organization, perhaps the less information you get from the top in terms of their priorities and perspective.
Yeah, I agree, but I also agree that if you're at management level, you don't see what's happening at the functional niche, small sub-compartmental level as well. So I think you need to kind of see both to have a very big picture of a stronger picture of what's going on organizationally. Tim, you have country level analysis. Like, do you see a dichotomy or like a disconnect between what you see at corporate versus what they see at the country, and how are you managing to bring those together?
Yeah, it's an interesting it's an interesting dilemma. You know, so I came from EY, publicly traded company, command and control, the CEO at the top, and kind of stuff goes down. Now I'm at a partnership where there are 12 or 13,000 partners in the firm. They all think they're in charge, right? So, and EY is actually an aggregate of legal entities at the country level. So the ability of our global chairman to say, this is what we're going to do, and have everybody across all the countries salute and say, yes, sir, that doesn't happen. So it's very interesting that having to herd the cat, so to speak, and get alignment. There's a lot of need for collaboration across the different entities, whether they're a country entity or a business unit entity. So we are having to do, I think, a lot of work to try and get ourselves to the point where we really can understand what they all do and understand at the local level. And to be honest, one of the other things that's been happening inside EY from a CI perspective is a shift from secondary research to primary research. And over time, we've been doing a lot more primary research, but a lot of that primary is internal primary research, where we're talking to and interviewing local leaders and trying to get that understanding that they may have about what's going on in the marketplace, because they are closer to it than we could ever be from a corporate entity kind of a thing. So yeah, we are talking to experts, local experts. We're talking a lot to people who are joining EY from other firms, from competitors, and trying to understand, really to get a sense for what's happening in some of the outreach areas inside the firm. But it is a challenge.
That's actually quite awesome, because I think that helps bridge that gap. Any kind of, I guess, internal conflict kind of goes away when you partner and you pull in insights from people at the more country level or functional level. I think that kind of knocks down those barriers and that whole you versus us kind of attitude. I think that's awesome. And I also think that we should also remember that like 80% of what we need for competitive intelligence resides in our organization. So doing primary on your own people is a great way to collect intel without having to go out even outside the company.
Yeah, it's been very effective, and I know August Jackson is on the line. August was a big proponent of primary when he was at EY, and a lot of the things we're doing now are implementing things that August had kind of been encouraging us to do. So August, you'll be happy to know in the year that you've left, we're continuing to push this forward, and if anything, we're doing more primary than we ever have before. So thank you for that.
And we have the question here too about having to adjust over your teams and your approaches over time as as various conditions change. And so when each of you have had experience developing intelligence teams, and so you start out with perhaps one model, and you're aligned with the various needs there, but obviously the landscape needs change. And so how have you managed that over time? What are the types of drivers you think about in terms of in terms of the need to change your approaches and models, or perhaps the internal makeup of your team, or your strengths, and your resources, might have shifted. How do you manage all of that, within the various frameworks that you've operated in?
Alysse, do you want to go? Do you want me to go?
I could go. I'll try to keep it short. Having 13 bosses in 9 different departments, I think that just defines being agile in this environment. But the way I managed it was by finding the part of the organization who had the most pull, because I wanted guaranteed livelihood for my team. I never wanted anyone to be cut. I was actually considered mama bear because I wanted to make sure everyone in my team was very well taken care of. So I always tried to align the team with whoever had the most pull and the most power within the organization. So when I first started, I talked about how that was sales. Very much a sales help desk support function with a little CI rolled in. When we got acquired by McAfee, there was another competitive intelligence function that resided in McAfee. So we ended up pivoting to product management because of our we had a really, really strong technical benchmark skill set because we hired a ton of tech support engineers into the team. So we pivoted to that role because product management at the time had a massive pull, and it moved us deeper into the legacy McAfee group versus the legacy secure computing group. And then over time, built it from there. I really focused it on, we were on one business unit, focusing on a very small set of products because I had a smaller team, and I wanted to just execute the crap out of that. And that by focusing very specifically, we were able to build an amazing deep dive into what was network security at the time. And we used that as a way to get ourselves more globally focused and looking at all of the product lines within the portfolio. And the way we did that is we knew that the executives were all very competitive. GMs were working, wanted to have a higher revenue and higher growth rates than their fellow GMs. So we made sure our GM, when they went to a C-level meeting, that person was so primed with competitive information, make everybody else jealous. And that's actually what happened. They all came running to us asking for, where's our CI? I'm like, pony up the head count and we'll do it. And that's how we grew the function from one business unit to covering a tactical function across all of the business units. And then we became a global, product management focused, very technical group. Then we rolled in. That's when we started building out more of the functional responsibilities, supporting every function within McAfee. But it took knowing the organization, knowing the personalities, and doing a little bit of manipulation to make sure that your team's primed for success.
Yeah, from my perspective, thankfully I haven't had as many bosses as Alysse has had over the last few years. But each time we've had a major organizational change, from knowledge to global markets, now to global strategy, we've taken the opportunity when doing that to really do an introspective view of what we've been doing, who our main customers are, what our main deliverables were, what the frequency of that was, how much primary versus secondary we've been doing, et cetera, et cetera. And each step along the way, we've kind of done what do we keep doing? What do we want to modify? What do we want to stop doing? What do we want to add? And that's been really good. You don't want to do that every year necessarily, but given that the cycle we've kind of been on in every couple year, it really is a good opportunity to take a step back and say, where's the value you're adding? What do you really need to do strategically for your organization? You need to think strategically about CI and how to maximize its value inside the firm. So we try to drink a little bit of our own Kool-Aid, right, in terms of understanding how competitive we are inside the company in terms of adding value. So that's those decision points as we've gone from entity to entity structurally, organizationally, have been a great opportunity for us to really take that step back and evaluate where we are and where we want to be moving forward.
Terrific. Thank you. And we have a couple of questions queued up here. We have Tom Jenrick asking, what do you think is the right size of a CI team? Managers base this on company size, account support or bandwidth, C-suite's established budget. For background, my team supports both Strat and Tact, is housed under sales, and supports across all portfolios and accounts.
I don't know that there is a correct answer to this question. I think it really depends on your organization, your culture, its willingness to pay. I will say that at least inside EY, the CI organization is a few headcount higher today than it was a couple years ago. So we have been able to demonstrate value whenever we've had somebody leave the team to take a different job, EY, or as August did, to take a job outside of EY. We've never had any question about whether or not we can backfill for that person. No one said, well, this is a great opportunity to go down a headcount. So I think that you kind of get to this equilibrium point where you find the right number for your entity in terms of what they can afford and where the value is. I personally kind of find it's better to have more demand than you have capacity for, at least not way out of whack, but it allows you to really prioritize the higher value things you want to do. You don't want to have people sitting around doing nothing or working on lower value kinds of activities.
I completely agree. I think a lot of it comes down to how many folks internally are using to collaborate. I've had a team of 8, massively awesome, world-class team, technical gurus, to now I'm a CI army of 1 in the same industry I was at McAfee. So I can see the value in having an entire team of really expert people, but I'm also, very successful in my 6 months at Tanium collaborating with all of the internal folks that have tons of internal experience. They have the partners, friends. I can leverage their networks, and it's a collaborative environment where I'm able to be a person that pulls it all together, but I'm not the expert on everything. I have, a whole bunch of people internally that help me build that. And that's kind of depends on your level of collaboration internally.
I think that's a great point, Alysse, because at the moment, the EY CI team is 13 people dedicated 100% of their time to CI, and those people are spread throughout the world. But we network and collaborate with people throughout the business at the country level, the business unit level, the sector level, who are doing CI part of their time, part of their work, right? So there are a lot of part-timers out there. So we have a broader network that we can leverage. And then the internal experts that I talked about previously, that you can go and just tap into them and their understanding of the marketplace. That's what really gives you the reach and the leverage that you need.
Mm-hmm.
Terrific. And we have Cliff Cal asked another question. Do you find that the external state of the economy, as it affects your industry, affects the nature of your work? For example, is strategic work plentiful in good times and tactical work more necessary when times are not so good?
I could say that I don't think cybersecurity has yet to see a major decline. There's we all know a recession is going to hit at some point, and it may affect my industry, but because it's such a vital component and there's such a huge threat of the hacking community, and it's only growing, I kind of feel like we're probably somewhat okay compared to other industries. But I can tell you through lean times as far as organizationally, through M&A, through just rough patches in quarterly sales and whatnot, that being more tactical for me was helpful because I wasn't a cost center. I could tie back, yes, we were expensive, but I could tie back the expense for my team right back to specific deals that we were very involved with and won, and have millions of dollars that we could account for and say that we were partly responsible. Whereas on a strategic function, I'd love to hear, Tim, your perspective, how in a lean time, how do you make sure that you're still considered valuable?
Yeah, it's interesting in that the EY business anyway is, I don't want to say it's recession proof, because pieces of it are highly correlated to how well the economy is working. But in many ways, some of the biggest growth areas that we have come in times when the economy is challenged or our clients are challenged. So they actually need more consulting help, more advisory help along the way. So we're trying to get ourselves to the position where pieces of the business across our entire portfolio are kind of balanced across economic different conditions.
Perfect. And I just want to touch base with everybody about the time. We have about 10 minutes to go. So please share your final questions in the remaining time that we have for Alysse and Tim. And maybe you can settle this, Tim, it's a little off topic, but there is a debate about.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. Yeah.
Yeah, or baseballs behind you.
Yeah. It's both. The picture there is a puzzle of Citi Field, which is where the Mets play, and that's my favorite team. And the display next to it is actually golf balls. I collect a ball from each course that I play wherever I play. So it's a little bit of both.
And Alysse, I didn't mention this in your bio, but I think this is an appropriate time to say that she is a season ticket holder to for the Packers.
Well, correction, I'm a shareholder.
Oh, shareholder.
Shareholders don't get season tickets, sadly. So that's a little known fact of Green Bay Packer.
Oh God.
But so just a final just a final time check, before we wrap up. If there are any other questions or comments for Alysse and Tim. So, but this has been a very robust discussion. I appreciate the thought and the energy and the experience that you've both have brought into this. And I think also, clarifying the question and the struggles that people have had, about the strategic versus tactical question, because I think for some time now, many of us had seen that there was an emphasis on strategy as being better, and I think that you both have made a very good case for a more integrative, holistic approach to this for organizations. And I think to your last point, Alysse, to being flexible, right? We have to be adaptive, and that's what CI is. So would you each like to share some final thoughts as we wind down?
Should we arm wrestle for it, Tim?
Go ahead. I started. You can go first this time.
I think the one thing I want to take away from this, and it was a comment that was made in the chat, was we probably at this point as CI fellows should take a leadership role in stopping this whole dichotomy between strategic and tactical. Let's knock it off. Finally, let's just actually call it decision support, call it what it is, and then talk to the fact that CI should be flexible in an organization. Be prepared to do both. Prepared to do one. Whatever your organization needs to maintain your livelihood and your employment, let's do it. And let's just stop trying to make it, one's better than the other.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. Kind of closing comments, getting back to my original comments. Think of this as a continuum where there's value across the entire continuum. It's not a us versus them situation at all. It's not a higher order or lower order situation. There's a lot of decisions that need support from competitive intelligence, and those could be tactical decisions or strategic decisions or some blend of the two. And we need to be in a position where we can provide that value and that insight to really create the opportunity for competitive advantage. And that's what we're all about.
Terrific. And pardon me. And so this basically takes us, to our final moment. And so thank you all for joining us once again. As I look at this chat again, I'm always just so impressed and delighted by the amount of energy and the enthusiasm and expertise that we also have among our fellow audience members and practitioners. So thank you all for contributing to this very robust conversation. And I just want to remind you that with our conversations, we always, I'll be posting the recording of this to our Twitter feed as well as our LinkedIn group. And so you'll have the address in a little bit, but just to emphasize that let's continue this conversation. As with all the topics that we are presenting this year, because this is really our inaugural year for the webinars, these are just the beginning of these conversations. We're really scratching the surface on this. And also all of our practice, all of these aspects of our practices, are really continuous. And so we'll be revisiting this again. Let's build on it in on social communities as well. And so I look forward to seeing you there. But thank you very much to Tim and Alysse. And for those of you who would like to reach out to them, here are their contact information. And so, please feel free to do that. And importantly, we'll have our next webinar announced very, very soon. And with that, if you'll just keep tabs on our CI Fellows website. And the CI Fellows website has an events calendar. And it's not just on Fellows events, but we also have events for the CI community as well. So for those of you who have various events and you're speaking, please feel free to share with us, and we're happy to help promote this on our calendar. Also, you can find us on Twitter at the CI Fellows. And then we also have our community group, the Council of Competitive Intelligence Fellows group. So check those various channels for announcements on our August webinar. And some of you are already subscribed to our newsletter. And so if you sign on for that, you'll actually get first dibs. So you'll get first notice of our events. So thank you again for sharing your wonderful expertise and your experience, and for guiding this conversation, Tim and Alysse. And we look forward to more of this. And again, thanks so much to our community and our audience for sharing with us your terrific questions, your comments, and your experiences, and just creating a robust conversation in our chat as usual. So thank you all. We look forward to seeing you online. And we also have one more anonymous attendee asking a final question just right under the wire. I'd love to hear Tim's comment about Kodak. So is there anything that you would like to add as your capstone on the Kodak discussion, Tim?
Oh, I don't think I can do it in 30 seconds, unfortunately, Cynthia. Yeah, the short story is the pundits' view that Kodak didn't know what was going on is false. We certainly knew what was happening. It was a question of not necessarily being in agreement as to what should really be done about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a terrific way of settling that question. So, thank you for that. And so all of you, I hope you have a wonderful next few weeks until we meet again at our next webinar. And so we will, we'll wrap this up for today, and we will see you soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.